Yeah. You guys all ready? Is everyone ready? Steve?
They just got unlucky.
Ready?
No.
Oh, yeah. All right, so 11th of March, calls me to order 9:02. Do a roll call.
Greg Beckler.
Steve Fitzgerald.
Lori Hannon.
Parks Thompson, Bill Palmer. Tiffany's
Tiffany.
iPhone.
Tiffany Gatesman.
Okay. Approval of the agenda. Does anyone make a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Parks.
Parks.
Yep. What's up?
All right, approval of the consent agenda and minutes. Any comments on the minutes? Okay, approval of the consent agenda and minutes.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda and minutes.
Second.
Okay, Parks. All in favor?
Aye.
Open forum, do you have anyone online? See anybody? All right. Move to discussion of the TIF assessment review with Troy.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Nice to be with you all. So this matter is in follow-up to Debbie's conversation. I wanted some more information based on my follow-up of the matter. And thankfully, Debbie was really helpful, as she has always been, and was informative on that particular utility parcel or utility account regarding public service of Colorado. So this is an assessment that occurs throughout actually all the tax areas of the town. And there's a portion of these lines that are part of the common elements of the Forest Meadows subdivision. So these are elements to the property that you can't really remove out of the rolls, as I've been told, because I asked if we could just remove it from the rolls, because it seemed to me a little odd that a utility parcel was being included. But Debbie feels like it's something that's pretty common, and I would agree that I'm used to seeing these parcels, not always in DDAs, but ultimately, she explained to me that it's a common element that you can't really remove from the rolls. And I think we've got good math going forward in terms of revenue projection. So as far as any kind of concerns going forward, I don't have any in terms of calculations and reliability of information, which I think is really important. I noticed one particular parcel missing from Debbie's list that I had in mind. Got that squared away. It was a parcel that was subdivided. So with that, all my questions were addressed, and I'm happy to answer any from the board.
Text real quick. The missing parcel from Debbie's roll. You
Yes.
figured that out.
I
Sorry,
did.
just repeat what you just said.
Okay.
So was it missing or it was just
No.
hidden there?
Nope, it
Okay.
was subdivided into 8 new parcels.
Gotcha. Okay. So basically, Troy is in agreement with Debbie's assessment.
Correct. Everything looks good.
Yeah, and it sounds like in talking with Debbie, the parcel that kind of resulted in the large miscalculation, seems like even if it's on the rolls, if she just takes out that mill levy that's associated with that parcel when she's doing the calculations in the future, that should give us a pretty accurate number, because that was worth, I think, like $80 or something like that. But
Yep, I agree with that comment, sir.
great. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Troy.
You bet.
All right, so do we want to go over the budget, updated budget with everyone?
Yes. Yeah, I will go ahead and pull that up and share my screen. Oh. Sorry, my PDFs are not, there we go, not loading at the moment. So Lori and Nick and I met with Troy to kind of go through his review of Debbie's assessment and then also talk about the revised budget. I think I have it, thank you. And what that might look like. So I see this is where I don't know how to make it bigger because it's big on, and I can amend it.
It should be at the very bottom right-hand corner. You can't see it because of the
The
script.
I'm magnifying it, but it's full screen. Okay. That didn't really help. There we go. All right. So you should all have this in your packet as well if it's easier to look at that way. But basically we are dealing with the tax revenues of approximately 36,900 in comparison to the 64,300 that we were expecting based on Debbie's previous calculations. So it is a significant decrease in revenues. We had about 6,000, a little over 6,000 that rolled over from the $30,000 in seed money last year that was not spent. So this was calculated once we paid for all the professional services. So some of those had actually been paid last December, and then Troy's services we actually paid in, I think, February, but went ahead and calculated them as if they had been paid last year, just to give us kind of cleaner budget numbers to work with. So that gives us in total a little over 43,000 for this year to work with. So our kind of initial stab at this, we lowered a lot of the numbers, tried to keep as much in there for kind of district enhancements as possible. We went back and forth on the community outreach, but that does seem like kind of an easy way to have the DDA out there in the public and have some visibility before there's some real money to play with. So we kept that at 5,000, but those numbers there give us a total of about 41,000. I don't know that we will spend all of this in these different categories, but if we don't, then that kind of rolls over to next year, and I don't know that that's a bad thing. So again, trying to kind of strike that balance of taxpayers voted for this, showing them that the DDA is out there in the community doing something, but also recognizing that as we have more money, we'll be able to do things of more significance.
And it is true that we can hold money over year to year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep. Yeah. Again, I think professional services is on the high end, but that gives us that flexibility if a developer was to come to us tomorrow and offer a deal that seemed viable and we would need, legal review and bond counsel and things like that. Maybe not bond counsel, but just kind of that idea that we have that flexibility. Otherwise, I think Troy is kind of who we are currently working with. Doesn't expect that he would cost us 10,000 for the year. If we did at some point want to bring, DCI or someone else in to do some sort of development training specifically with the DDA or with the DDA and kind of small businesses, that could come from that pot. Yeah, so any thoughts or questions? We approve this will go back in front of the Board of Trustees for approval as a revised budget, and then we'll pass it along to DOLA, the state of Colorado.
Who is our legal counsel? Is it just Whitmer with the town or?
No, so Whitmer, we have had review some pretty basic things. We were working with Butler Snow for coordination
Okay.
of the DDA. We could continue to work with them. I think it could also make sense to look for other legal counsel. They have a pretty conservative interpretation of DDAs and how they work and how they can spend money. And in talking with Troy and Bill Schrum from DCI, who is really involved in providing consultation as we were forming the DDA, it is a more conservative approach than some of the other lawyers that they have worked with in terms of how money can be spent. The biggest thing that we came into contact with was, if you read the statute word for word, it does not allow for kind of a pay-as-you-go model as Butler Snow is interpreting it, that the DDA based on statute can spend money through loans, lending, bonding, that sort of thing. So there's ways that when Butler Snow has worked with other DDAs that they have set that up, but to others, that seems kind of like an overcomplication in terms of, they're moving money around from different accounts so that money is technically being loaned, like maybe it's being borrowed from one fund and then spent and then paid back to that fund. And talking with Troy, and Troy, I don't want to speak for you, you can speak to this too, but that seemed like it might not be the best way to go about things or necessary. So that said, Butler and Snow, I think, is well respected. They work with a lot of DDAs. They found ways to do it that they feel fits within the statute, but it's something that we can definitely look at as we need more legal counsel in the future.
Yeah, I think we should know who we're gonna work with before we get into the be really slow to respond.
Yeah, I mean, it might not be the worst idea to have somebody lined up. And that said, I will say when we reached out to some of the different legal counsel that was recommended for DDA formation, it did move pretty quickly in terms of finding people, but we'd be talking, probably several weeks to get something reviewed versus sending it to them that day kind of thing.
Yeah, okay. No comments.
Right, well, there is a resolution then.
All right, so, resolution 2025-0301, a resolution adopting the revised Fraser DDA annual budget for 2025. Do we read the whole thing? I can't remember. It's been a while. Like top to bottom.
I think you can just read the
Yeah.
the
The
therefore.
bullets, yeah. Therefore, be it resolved by the Fraser DDA Board that the attached revised Fraser DDA 2025 annual budget is hereby adopted by the Fraser DDA pending approval of the Town of Fraser Board of Trustees. The revised 2025 annual budget will be presented to the Board of Trustees for their review and approval at their March 19th, 2025 Board of Trustees meeting. So call for a vote. Do we need to move this first? Yeah.
Yep.
Let's move.
I shall move to make the resolution 2025-0301 budget draft 3/5/25 go to town council, I guess.
For review and approval. Second,
Seconded.
all right,
Perfect.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Moving on to the enhancement grant applications and documentation for our review. So the committee met last week and went through all of the applications. These are our recommendations for your comment, review, discussion, amendment. Did you want to pull them up? Or Sarah?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and review the eligibility for the business enhancement grants. So pull that up 1 second. We did find a little bit confusion with a couple of applicants who filled out the business incentive request form, which is much more involved. So we had them refill it out. So we're gonna work on cleaning up this web page. We had some formatting issues when we were. Screen. So now is it still these three dots where I make it bigger? So, the business enhancement grant, just to review the eligibility and the goals of the program. They're meant to support our current businesses and improve the economic vitality of Fraser by encouraging enhancements to the physical appearance of business properties, improvement of public infrastructure, amenities and gathering places, and increased ADA accessibility. Eligible projects include ADA improvements, publicly displayed art, landscaping, and streetscape improvements, exterior decorations, building facade improvements and renovations, painting, signage, awnings, cornices, sidewalks, exterior lighting, gathering spaces, public amenities, patios, or other related exterior improvements. So really focused on the exterior of the building and kind of the curb appeal. The exception being potentially ADA improvements, which could be indoors or outdoors to provide greater accessibility and inclusivity to the community's access to those businesses. Improvements providing the most public benefit would be prioritized. This includes projects that increase ADA accessibility, provide gathering spaces and amenities for public use, improve public infrastructure, and or contribute to the beautification and uniqueness of Fraser. So as a reminder, grant requests of anywhere between 2,000 and 25,000 will be considered. This was a significant increase from the previous max of 7,500. 50% project match is generally required, with lower project matches may be considered for projects providing maximum public benefit. This was the first time that we've had a priority consideration deadline. That was March 3rd, with the idea that if there was funding left over after this competitive process, we would continue to review applications on a rolling basis. So there is money left over. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we asked people to complete a business enhancement grant application page. They could provide a cover letter, as relevant, include site plans, project sketch, photos, anything to help kind of explain the project, an itemized project budget, if they had formal estimates, and then plant list and quantities if they were landscape proposals. Not eligible is new construction, property acquisition, refinancing existing debt, interior improvements, including remodels, expansions, equipments, or fixtures. Apart from ADA accessibility improvements, home occupations are not eligible, and projects that were already completed are not eligible if the costs were already incurred prior to them applying and being granted approval for reimbursement. Again, this is a town program that we've asked the DDA to kind of help really promote and get the word out, and then just to provide any comments or review that you might have. So we did have a subcommittee with Lori Hannon and Bill Palmer, as well as Diane Butler from Grand County Economic Development, myself and Sarah Wick, who's traditionally overseen these grants, participated. And we met last Thursday. Yeah, and reviewed applications. So we can go through there and have just a discussion. Again, we'll talk about what the subcommittee's kind of formal recommendations are to the board. If you have any comments or feedback, or anything you disagree with that you would like to kind of just share with the Board of Trustees for consideration, we can do that. But at this point, we're kind of considering the subcommittee's recommendation as that review process. I do think we have to ask Nick to recuse himself from the discussion. Since you had an application, Barry also had an application, but is not here. Need to have the room, or you can stay and just not.
You can stay in the room, but just can't participate in the conversation.
You can't participate in
Banner.
any part of it or just
Just-
his part?
Just. I would think, right, just his part?
Just his
Just
part,
Cameron.
right?
I think all.
All of it because he's applying for.
Yeah, I think given that it's a
I would've done
competitive
for you, Barry.
process, so
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
I did notice, there's, for Nick's business, a mural comment I assume Sarah Wick talked about the mural commission as part of the mural festival potential option.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that when we get to that one. Yeah, so you do have the complete applications and then kind of this spreadsheet that is meant to kind of provide a summary and capture a snapshot of the information. So let me go ahead and actually, if everybody has it in front of them, that's probably easier than trying to look at this. I'm guessing it's going to be pretty small on the screen. So the first business was the Holiday Inn Express. They were looking for funding to complete a project out in front of the Holiday Inn with a gazebo that they're looking to put in to replace the fire pit, and then to provide lighting along a trail going from the front of the Holiday Inn and that kind of gazebo fire pit area back to the Fraser River Trail. The committee, because we had enough money to go around for the request, I wouldn't say we spent a ton of time really digging into like ranking the projects and getting super specific with that, but just deeming if it was a project that was deemed to provide public benefit as described by the grant eligibility and the goals of the grant. And then what items were eligible, because there were a few that some items that were requested were deemed eligible and some were not. So this project was deemed eligible. It was deemed to provide that public benefit in terms of kind of improving that curb appeal and an outdoor amenity. They did say that the gazebo and fire pit area would be available to the public. They could get a day pass and pay to use it, and then the trail up would be open to public access, but primarily used by guests making that connection back to the Fraser River Trail. So the recommended award was 50% of the total budget that was requested. So it was a little over 8,000. And Bill and Lori, feel free to jump in anytime. Any additional thoughts?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On our budget, it said that we only have 20,000 for this business enhancement grant. Was that right?
So this is the town's business enhancement grant.
Okay.
It has a
So this
budget
doesn't
of
have to deal with our
125,000.
DDA
DDA budget
grants.
isn't
Perfect.
affected by this at all.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I was like, we don't got that. It's like all these are done.
And
Yeah.
once we go through, we can discuss, kind of go back to some preliminary conversations about whether or not the DDA, kind of based on these applications and where things are at, having about $20,000 in that enhancement bucket, if there's anything additional or supplemental that the DDA would want to offer in terms of a grant program. So,
Yeah, I had no concerns over this project.
No.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like overall, I mean, besides there was like a couple like straight interior stuff and then some marketing things that were kind of,
Everyone was pretty
everything was, yeah,
Pretty
pretty.
on application.
Cool.
But yeah, for this particular project, there's no issues. Yeah, like fully funded.
Simple Coffee did request money for a high table bar and seating at the front window. I think it'd be a great project, but just based on being an interior improvement and not being specifically excluded in the grant criteria, we deemed it ineligible.
Yep.
Camber was looking to replace roofing on the awning, painting the building, renewing the mural, 2 new windows on that same wall that has the mural, replacing an outdated water heater with a tankless water heater, which would allow more space for ADA access and just access in general, a ramp to the back patio, which would improve ADA access. And then they had submitted back in 2024 a proposal to build kind of a little retaining wall there by the sidewalk to help with curb appeal, as well as to maybe try to keep some of that snow melt from coming onto the sidewalk. But they have not actually submitted for that reimbursement for that project. So I did reach out to Nick and just clarify that this project is meant to include that scope from the original project and reimbursement as well. It would be rolled in. It wouldn't be in addition to, and it was a pretty small amount. I want to say it was like $650 or something. That was 50% of the original budget. So, and then flower boxes or planters on top of the wall. I'll add too, Lori did recuse herself from the discussion when we were having it about the grants, since she works at Camber.
So what's the 13,000 that's not eligible?
So,
Is that the water
um,
heater?
yeah. So five
That's
thousand
indoors,
five
yeah.
hundred was recommended, which was 50% of
The eligible.
the eligible, which was the ramp, the exterior paint, the concrete ramp, the windows, the awning replacement, the sidewall, flower bed improvements, which again include that work from the 2024 grant. We're looking at the mural separately. So that the request for that was 10,000 to renew it. So I'll talk about that in just a second. The one item that was deemed ineligible was the water heater. Even though it would provide more space, again, since the grant kind of specifically excludes some of those interior improvements. I know we talked with the town board about possibly including energy efficiency improvements with businesses, and the decision of the Board of Trustees at this time was not to include that in this grant.
But that if it makes it more ADA accessible,
I think you could make that argument.
yeah, because I mean, it's not super ADA accessible
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Canberra, so. But yeah, so that's 10 grand, I guess.
The the
to
water
fix up
heater
the-
amount, I think was 2,000 was the
Yeah, yeah.
request
No,
for
no,
the
that's
water
fine.
heater. The 10,000 was related to the mural, and again, I'll talk about
Oh.
that in just a second. And again, if the DDA wanted to make an argument for that and include that in the information going to the board, we could. I think the committee thought it kept things cleaner. I mean, one idea is if the water heater itself isn't covered, but and they have to do that anyways, but they're looking at a tank list to make it more accessible, paying the difference between the price of your standard water heater and a tankless, since tankless is more expensive.
It was a combo of like inside and then also knowing the board had already talked about energy efficient stuff, which that was new information for me, which I was like, oh, that seems like a normal thing
I,
that they'd already kind of.
I would just think without knowing the particulars, if the grant allows for ADA accessibility and it accomplishes that, that it would qualify. But
Yep. Yeah, we went back and forth.
yeah, I would think, that's part of the grant, the way I read it.
Yeah, I think you can make that interpretation. I think some could deem it a stretch and others could deem it totally appropriate, so.
Like if it's, 30 inches and it needs to be 36 and you get that, I think that's clear. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the particulars of it, but if something's not ADA compliant and you do something that makes it ADA compliant, I don't think we'd want that, but all good.
But why don't we keep going through them and then we can come back to any kind of a summary of any comments or ways that you might differ from the subcommittee if you want to talk about that. So the mural, the group talked about, Sarah Wick looked back at, so originally this mural was commissioned by, is it PAC or Fraser Valley Arts? PAC?
Fraser Valley Arts doesn't do any murals.
Okay, so it's PAC.
It's always PAC.
Yeah. So PAC is the Public Arts Committee through the town. They have commissioned, they give, correct me if I misspeak, Steve. They provide commissions for murals to winners of the Mural Fest in a particular category.
So there's a variety of categories. There's People's Choice, Artist Choice, but the PAC and the business owner where the mural is going to go each year chooses the mural commission award winner. And it's $10,000 of a budget. Sometimes we give all 10,000 like we did last year. It's going to go in the elementary school. Sometimes we split that up like we did the year before, where there's one mural in the rec center and another elsewhere in town.
Yeah, so that's how this mural came to be. Sarah Wick looked back at the original price and it was either 42 or 4,700. Failed to write down the exact number, but it was less than 5,000. So the 10,000 seemed like it would be a little high to do a renewal, which I interpreted to be touching up the current one. He made up the number, that's fine. Yeah.
And Nick, forgive me, is it to touch it up or is it to replace it?
Yeah, it's more or less been 6 years almost, and there's just parts of it that are peeling up as it's going to happen. But I'm not sure how much that would cost. So I just I made it extremely high just to cover all the bases. So
Good budgeting.
Yeah. So the committee kind of some of us were like, "Oh, I think it still looks great." And so we kind of the other committee members were supposed to walk by and kind of look at it better to deem if it was worthy. The discussion was if it does need to be redone, and that's something that we would look to do of actually having the town cover the match for that piece of the ask. Because it is seen as a huge public benefit. You know, it's visual to everybody, whether you're frequenting Camber, have never stepped foot into Camber, everybody sees it when they come into town. We were talking with Joe McDonald, and Steve, I'd be curious your thoughts on this. He was saying that the mural was put over a previous mural or painting that was on the wall, or maybe just paint.
Don't remember.
But that because of that, like it wasn't properly kind of cleaned off and prepared, that this was going to continue to be an issue and it would keep coming off, and that eventually, be it now or in the future, the mural probably just needs to be completely redone. So kind of a question of whether you do that now, whether you spend money to do the touch up, whether you wait and see if this wants to be another, if PAC wanted to do another commissioned piece on
Yeah.
this same wall in the near future.
Well-
Sarah was actually going to reach out to the artist who did it and see what it would cost to renew it.
Was that before Camber was there? Like when it was like the old Beaver upholstery building or whatever it was? Like the
put in-
mural before it, what was on the wall before it? What building? There
It might
wasn't
have just
one.
been the paint on the wall.
It was just the paint, so it wasn't properly prepped.
What was there?
That's Joe McDonald, who works for the town and is involved in a lot of the arts events and stuff. That's his interpretation.
So I know exactly what happened there because I did it.
That's what I figured.
Basically, I pressure washed it and then primed it again. But may not have been done to a professional level, but I did the best I could. So
But you
Yes.
did
Yes.
pressure wash.
So it
it
should have
and
been
clean it.
sanded.
yes.
Then you
There's
did all
not
you
much
can.
more that would have been done
Okay.
by a so-called professional. I mean, that the murals that you see on these boards, we just prime them.
It's just
Yeah.
old wood too. Like
Yeah.
that's an old building.
And it's old stucco. Old,
Yeah,
The sun is
stucco.
shining.
It's
The
just
sun
stucco.
stop.
So-
It's sun. That's what's doing it.
and it's also
I would just say
Always on the
let's
sun,
try to get it
so-
redone then, because
Yeah.
personally, like if we're gonna just have to keep redoing it, it's like giving, we don't need to keep bringing someone back. Let's get it done right.
It's held.
That'd be my vote. I see it.
Well,
every
and it
time.
sounds
Building's
like
over
from
100 years old.
Steve's
Yeah, it's not-
perspective that maybe it was
So
done
50?
right, and it's just the reality of an outdoor mural in a harsh climate that gets
Right.
a lot of
Yeah,
sun.
that's exactly how I would.
Should it be redone, Steve? Do you think it should just be redone?
I love the idea of touching it up. If that's
Touching it up.
sufficient.
Yeah.
And we can always include it in a future redo as part of the mural commission program, but it is a bit of an iconic spot right now.
I agree.
And it certainly looks to me like it's in reasonably good repair.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Did you say 6 years?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been 6. Like honestly, it's just the black spots because of probably again that heat.
Yeah.
But if I thought it was gonna be like 15,000 for the original mural, so that's why I kind of went 10. But if it was only 5 for the original, like touch-ups are gonna be what, like 15 to maybe
Yeah.
1,500 too.
yeah, I mean, to give you
Yeah.
a sense, the bison that's across from the distillery and Greg and Kevin's building, that was a little over 10. You guys paid some extra, if I recall correctly.
I think we kept our budget.
All right.
75.
So there you go.
Nice.
That's, a 3-story with a lift and all that.
Yeah.
The one we're doing on the elementary school, you can see the playground from 40 this spring, that will be 10. So those are bigger
Right.
than yours. And so just touching it up, I'm sure we can do it at a much more affordable level.
I think we covered the lift and housing. So
that what you did?
It's probably
Okay.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my understanding is the artist is not local, so I'm assuming we'd have to pay to bring in the artist. and
Yeah. Or we get a local artist to,
To touch it up.
yeah. I mean, that,
Yeah.
in my humble opinion, would not be a major challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, Sky is also high in demand, and he probably is like years out. So you wouldn't be able to do it.
Who did it?
Yeah.
The original, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
And by the way, we are connected with dozens of mural artists.
I'm sure you
So
are,
Oh,
yeah.
We could easily
Like,
help.
even
source
like
them.
Sean Yarbrough or someone
Yeah.
in town, he would do
Many
it.
of them are up here.
Yeah, yeah.
Or in Denver, so. for
And
sure.
there's
That would
generally
not be
not
hard.
issues with
local.
asking a different
Okay.
artist
People
to
would like,
touch up a previous artist's work.
I don't think that'd be any challenge whatsoever.
Okay.
as long as they don't destroy it, right?
Yeah.
Touch
Yeah.
this- ah,
You know,
yeah.
and
sign at the
if
bottom.
we can't quite match the black, for
Yeah.
example, then every black spot gets repainted.
Yeah.
It just,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
it's not,
simple.
it's not a 10-minute job, but it's probably a 2-day job, is my
Sure.
guess.
Okay.
And we'll wash it again and.
Yeah, so the committee was looking more into the mural, but was behind providing the match and covering the cost of what was deemed to make sense with the mural at this point in time, be it renewing it, touching it up, or waiting a little bit and then potentially having it completely redone. But
Yep.
my novice eyes think it looks great.
Yeah.
I really like the mural, but
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so
I sit next to a lot. It does need some repair.
okay.
Yeah, I'm there very often as well. It's like heals some places, so.
I admittedly mostly see
Yeah,
it
yeah.
driving, walking
Yeah.
by, and not inspecting
Yeah.
it up close.
And I will say, if we get to the point where upon further inspection, it really just needs to be redone, then that's kind of I think a good question and discussion to have with PAC.
Mhm.
Because we're meeting Thursday, for example, and to my knowledge, we don't yet have, we not have selected a site for this year's mural festival.
Okay.
We're in that process. So whether it's this year or next year, we could certainly consider that as part of the cadence. And we always look for willing businesses.
Yeah, Steve, I'll throw out too. I don't know if Sarah Wick has mentioned this, but we've tossed around the idea of seeing if PAC wanted to have a mural commissioned, or we could just do it separate from the PAC process as part of the new bike park. And they're looking at putting in kind of like a tunnel, kind of similar to like an old mine
Love
shaft
that.
kind of thing that you'd go through, and
Yep.
the idea of having a mural, on a side of the wall, or somebody who got a mural last year from, it was like a bike tire. I don't know if you remember
I
what I'm
do.
talking about.
Hanson Brown.
They're interested in possibly donating it as well if there's a spot in the bike park to use that.
Well, and from my, again, not so humble opinion, things like murals for a community space in the bike park or St. Louis Landing, we should design in spaces for them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because it's now become a bit synonymous with our valley. We're trying to build that brand, and it's our community. We want to give our community beauty. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Hanson's would be cool though. You could just go put that over by local experience right now, and that'd be pretty sweet.
Yep.
Just pin it up.
Yeah.
That's a nice mural.
and I like his impressionist style.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
it sounds like the design has kind of like an elevated, because I was like, well, what do you either need to put it on a wall, or
You have to
just
put
have
it on
the
a wall.
stack unless you put something on either side.
No, it should be on a wall.
But it sounds like there'll be kind of an elevated start spot to one of the jump lines that might be a good spot to put murals. Where you
Okay.
just see the one side
Like
of it,
yeah, like
so.
a side, like a drop in.
Yep.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, back to
Solstice.
grants. Any other comments on that?
So we say we want to award for the mural cleanup or not?
I would. Yeah.
Include that,
I'm-
so that way
I'm
we
an
get
aye.
that award amount.
Yeah, I think the amount is still to be determined, but I can say that, yeah, the DDA is in support
Heavily in favor.
of
Everybody.
funding renewal
We all
of
look
the
at it.
mural.
We're happy to help.
Do you guys want to take a final group stance on the water heater?
I make a motion to approve the water heater amount if it provides for a non-ADA compliant space to be ADA compliant.
I
Agree. We don't make, no motion, official motions needed to.
Yeah, we can maybe do a motion at
Okay.
the end with
Yeah.
just anything that you'd like to
I wanted to make one.
edit, to add
Yeah.
to the committee's
sounded
Yeah,
official.
recommendation.
Yeah. That
Really.
Sounded good.
No, we talked about, making it focused on the
Topics on there.
ADA so it doesn't touch on what they've already talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Solstice, they were asking for a bunch of different items, and Lori and Bill, I did reach out and talk with Sue to kind of clarify some of the things she was looking to do. And I actually want to talk with you more about this, Antoinette. So some of the items were deemed eligible and some were deemed ineligible. So basically improvements to
Tailored
the
cards, yeah.
physical space and signage for their physical space. They're over in that Safeway marketplace, which I feel like businesses, for some reason other than the thrift store, they just kind of, despite being in the most visited spot in Fraser, I think are very unseen over there.
Totally.
So she was looking for some different banners. She said that they can't put signage in the ground, but they can put signage on a flagpole. So she's looking for something to two-sided to have on a flagpole over there to try to bring greater visibility to Solstice. She also was looking for banners for to hang at the rodeo. They sell things at the rodeo, and we said that would not be eligible. And then some work for brochures and things like that. And just kind of, they've been working on rebranding since they're no longer based out of the Wild Horse Inn in Tabernash, and now we're a Fraser building, and making people kind of realize they still exist and are around. They also want to try to cater events in the open space behind their building there in Cousins Ranch, in kind of the pavilion bathroom area. So I told her those sorts of things wouldn't be covered by this grant, but improvements and signage and things like that to their physical building space would be. So it's for a couple of tables and umbrellas to go out front. Designing for the logo and signage that would be on their building, but not the, again, brochures and kind of banners for the rodeo and catering and things like that. So that worked out to just over 1,500, was 50% of their ask. Next up, unless there's any comments, Colorado Corn Dog Company. They were looking to do some rebranding, going from Colorado Corn Dog to Colorado Corn Dog and Burger Company, if I remember correctly. So they were looking to kind of design, again, similar to Solstice. They had a mix of items that were deemed eligible and some that were deemed ineligible. So brochures and that kind of aspect of rebranding was deemed ineligible. What was deemed eligible was the design and installation of a new food truck vinyl wrap. Turk should be truck signage, and then the actual like printed menu boards that would go out on the outside of their food truck. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I was in agreement with all of the decisions.
Great.
Anything to make it look better would be good, yeah.
And I'm curious, does, I should know this, does the town have any guidelines, standards, aspirations for common look and feel for frontages of the businesses? I know we talked about during the Main Street project, but that was ages ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk about if we need kind of architectural standards, particularly in light of the Riverwalk district in development. I think there's been conversations with the Planning Commission on that. I don't know that they've really landed on anything, honestly.
Yeah, and I'd be the last person to suggest a Boulder-like restrictive
Right.
set of things, but it also would be nice if, even if it was just a design aspiration. You know, this is sort of the look and feel we'd like to see in our community, and as businesses consider changes, if they could conform to that to some extent, it would
Yeah.
give some commonality. So
Some-
just an
I
idea.
think the,
Some in like communities in Florida I've been through are pretty artsy and they'll have murals everywhere, but like on the outside, like the roof designs will be similar, or like the colors of the shingles will be similar, so things match up properly in the town, which
Yeah.
is kind of cool. It's like a cheaper way of doing things, but it still matches throughout the. It's not like, red roofs down the whole highway,
Yeah.
but there'd be like say that your our logo, the colors in the logo, you could do anything with those colors on the outside of your building. Like,
Yeah, or if you go to Telluride, how there's a mining theme for almost all the
Yeah.
construction,
mhm.
things like that.
Uh-huh.
Crested Butte's a good example of a kind of a funky,
Yeah.
eclectic business district.
I forget if it was a planning commission or a board meeting within the last year, but it came up and I think where it landed was probably rewriting that line in the code that suggests a funky and eclectic. That's like the only design guideline in the
Yeah.
code.
Yeah.
funky and
Oh, the
eclectic.
code actually
We got-
has
We got that
funky and
going.
eclectic. in it?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's like,
we
it's
got
not very
that.
pointed and targeted,
Funky,
so
yeah.
I think where people landed was we're having all the new wayfinding signs and the new logo, so putting those more kind of just more of them throughout town to be the consistency piece. And then maybe suggesting certain materials within the code, you know, I think it was like fireproof materials and certain
Yeah.
natural feeling and looking hard surfaces. But
Corrugated.
I never saw anything that
Yeah.
made any change,
All over.
but that was kind of the suggestion that was made.
And Steve, I'll double check. I don't think they're really doing anything with that as part of the comprehensive plan, but I'll verify that. I mean, I know they did like the conceptuals of the Riverwalk
Right.
district. We were in Avon with the Board of Trustees last year for the board retreat, and we went there because they had recently formed a DDA. And just walking around, there was kind of a mix of, because everything does look very uniform. And I can't remember if it was maybe been a combination of one of our Board of Trustees and their town manager was like, we do not need one more. I mean, everything's kind of that, I don't even know what to call it, beige, terracotta, kind of muted, natural looking building. So I think it's finding that balance of having
Yeah.
some cohesiveness without having everything look exactly the same
Yeah.
and not having
Well,
any
that was our
character
old
to
Vail
it.
Resorts, try and make everything look Tyrolean.
Yeah. So,
Guilty as charged.
all right. So Grandkids Learning Center applied. And I think you could argue as to whether or not they fit the eligibility as they are a nonprofit versus a for-profit business.
Would that matter?
Well, the committee deemed that it didn't.
Good.
Yeah,
Shouldn't.
yeah, no, but I'll bring up another case in just a second here that, so it was deemed that everything would be covered except for interior paint, that was not eligible, but they were looking for exterior paint, signage, doing some planting of native plants in the front, and some flower boxes and things, and then reseeding in the back.
Are they their own nonprofit or are they under Grand Foundation?
They're their own nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah, Grand Foundation just facilitates the distribution of
Everything.
money.
Got it.
They have a few funds that they administer, but they
Yeah.
really aren't overseeing any of these nonprofits.
And that's what we talked about because we were like, it makes sense because it's all this stuff was for the outside and what adheres to the rest of it.
Got it.
Yes, they have availability to get
Money.
from other places.
Yes, they
but
do.
this did fit.
And as a nonprofit, the town has another set of funds that they apply for every year that is administered through
good
the
point.
Grand Foundation.
Yep,
So
good point.
I think
That's what I
some
was gonna
staff
say.
initially were like, that's their avenue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair.
I mean, as I know, the film festival, we apply mainly through Grand Foundation. That's where we get most of ours.
I think some of the
But
discussion
we're also
was,
not our own nonprofit.
Yeah,
So,
so you should, just 2 seconds. The Grand Foundation administers funds for town of Fraser, town of Winter Park,
yeah. Oh, all of them.
Granby, et cetera. You should go after all of them.
All of them. Yep.
We have.
Yep. Yeah, I actually need to talk to you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about the Grand Foundation, the Grand Kids, because when they do the business enhancement grants, it's not for exterior improvements of their building, it's more for running of their business.
when they apply through the
expenses.
Grand Foundation.
No, they
Yeah,
apply for Grand Foundation or the town's
yeah.
funds.
Yep.
It's not for exterior improvements, so I do feel like this is a different.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And it seemed
Okay.
consistent with the spirit here for a physical location that's being
Yes.
refurbished.
Exactly.
Building. Yeah.
Yeah. And I did get an email that I need to respond back to again. Foxtrot Apartments want
Fox Run.
Fox Run,
Yeah.
thank you. They missed the deadline, but he wants to apply. There's still money left to replace the not facade, what's the word I'm looking for? The siding. Yes. Wants to replace the siding or paint the siding. And I initially responded and I said he wouldn't be eligible, it's not intended for residential properties. And his response is, well, aren't we a business and don't we provide one of the most needed services of housing? Which I think is true, but they are residences. This is not, deemed for individual houses to repaint or
Doesn't it
replace
say
the siding.
residential business, doesn't it say that in the exclusion?
It says,
House business, I was confused.
I think it's intended that if your business is run out of your house, we're not gonna paint your house.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Which I think is a similar idea, though. I mean,
Yeah.
and they're in residential zoning. Grandkids is in residential zoning. So I don't think they're eligible, but I think it's an area where we need to clean up the language. If he submits an application, I'll submit it to the committee, which if they, then it could go to the board, but and I've thought a lot about it. Like, I think it would be great if, apartment buildings look nice, the same as businesses, but we're also not gonna give, Grand Park money to paint the houses they're currently constructing to improve them, or
Yep.
that they just constructed. So I think there needs to be some cutoffs there, but
I hate to see
there
the
are other
term
thoughts.
slippery slope.
It
but it's
is.
hard.
It is.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the grandkids provides daycare for our workforce, so it's directly related to economic development. I suppose you could make a similar argument for providing housing. Grandkids is a nonprofit versus a for-profit apartment building. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
All right. And we are recommending a reduced match for grandkids of only 25% versus 50%. So that $8,625 would be their budget minus the interior paint with a 25% match. The distillery requested 25,000, the maximum amount, towards a permanent kind of patio covering. They had, back when the board approved increasing the
Yeah.
amount for this year, they went to the board and asked if they could get an increased match amount or an increased award amount from their application last year, where they had been awarded 7,500.
Right. They haven't used that, right?
They haven't used that, and for various reasons, it got pushed back in terms of going in front of the board. So it went in
Not
front of
yet.
the board like last month, and they
Right.
told them to apply as part of this cycle. But the recommendation of the committee is that they get the 25,000 inclusive of the 7,500 and not in addition to the 7,500. So they're getting the maximum award amount for the project.
I'm gonna hear about that.
Moose and Merchant, which is the bakery that's slotted to open later this summer, over there in front of the Strom Townhomes. They put in a request for outdoor patio furnishing and planters. Again, as I think we work on tightening up the language and considerations for eligibility, the grant's not really intended for new construction. It's meant to support current businesses once they open their current business. So some of it is maybe semantics. Given that it was for an outdoor patio, I think the committee felt comfortable awarding it since it's not actually going to the construction of the building itself. And then last but not least, our first and only applicant before the deadline day, Black Tie, wants to replace their siding. And the committee thought it was a very worthy project and awarded them their full ask.
Next to the post office,
Little
that
green
green
building.
building that
Definitely.
looks like it's gonna fall
Yeah,
down.
it
Needs-
definitely.
Yeah, it needs it
Definitely.
bad.
Yeah, and she said she tried to get quotes just to repaint it, and the painters told her there was no point in painting it, that she needs new siding. Or it
If
would
you're gonna
consider
do
it.
something that big, like replace the entire siding, would you ever have anybody go and inspect that building and make sure it's worth it? Because
They
I
said-
know some buildings, like you go inside, if you replace the siding, you're polishing the outside, but the inside is like structurally very unsound. And that one's had tons of mold problems.
She just, changed the interior of that building and added some units upstairs for rental units. So I am certain that our building inspectors have been in that building.
Okay.
How far that inspection goes outside of the new construction, I don't know.
I think they fixed the water because it comes back in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
It comes now. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just saying, just in the future, whether it's this one or any other building, if you're gonna put, 20K down as a town, you should probably throw someone in there and make sure that it's not gonna fall off the next day or that that thing is, molding out on the inside. And a lot of these buildings do have that problem in town.
Right. Yeah, we can look into that and see, because I'm not sure what. that
Not that I
inspection
don't, I want them to have that no matter what.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I want it to look better too. But it's like when you're doing your house, you're like, okay, cool. Maybe I have some problems on the inside. And a lot of these problems in town heavily affect the structure of the building,
Right.
especially the old ones.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
So any additional thoughts or comments? Yeah, I should have led with this. We have generally gotten 1, 2, maybe 3 applications throughout the year. So I think it was huge that we had this many businesses request money. The town budget does have 125,000, and it's actually a little bit more than that because there's a little bit of rollover money from last year, especially like Barry 7,500 that will be wrapped into this. So there's still a good amount of money if businesses want to continue applying. So I definitely encourage you to keep encouraging businesses to apply. I know, for example, a particular individual that has been railing against the lack of wheelchair spots and accessibility over at Murdoch's. I don't know if you have an in with
Craig?
whoever owns that whole development, but
Yeah.
so I think there's some good projects that could still come forward. Tim Kepke, who owns the building across from Shell there, had told me he was applying. I didn't see an application from him. He emailed me yesterday to confirm that I'd gotten his application. I told him I didn't have it, so I think he is going to submit an application as well. But yeah, I think it's been quite successful in having more visibility for the awards and having people request funding.
Yeah. Agree. That's good.
Yeah, so if you do want to make a motion in support, with any revisions that you would suggest be taken into consideration by the Board of Trustees, I think we can do that. And I'll include it in the staff briefing to the Board of Trustees as they're considering the applications.
I would make a motion to support the recommendations from the committee and add approving things, even if they're inside of the units that are creating ADA accessibility to the eligibility list for funds.
And inclusive of the Camber mural retouch.
And inclusive of the Camber mural retouch after kind of verifying the budget. yeah.
Yep.
I can second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, wait, is Tiffany still on or did we
No,
lose her?
she dropped.
Oh, her iPhone's still there.
Oh.
Tiffany, did you want to weigh in on that
It's a chat,
motion?
Yeah.
Nope.
We only have 5
There's-
people from the
yeah,
There's a chat in
There's a
the
chat on there.
Zoom.
It's a single.
It should
Comment
maybe
in there.
chatted.
Yeah, she should be able to unmute. Tiffany, if you can hear us and unmute yourself. Oh,
Oh,
Some of the other
she
two.
had to leave.
Oh, she might not.
She looked
Oh,
like
she's
this,
out.
okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say it's okay. 6 is a quorum. We had more than 6 for a quorum. Nick had to recuse himself and Tiffany stepped out. We started with a quorum.
Cool.
Go.
So that
Oh.
carries through the meeting.
Yeah.
She's the clerk.
Okay, cool.
I like your style.
Yeah, we're good with that.
Yeah, this is a
Yeah, it's
recommendation.
not a formal resolution.
Yep, that's fair.
Okay.
Supplemental grant funding discussion and the Fraser comp plan survey.
Yes. So in terms of the supplemental grant funding discussion, this kind of just goes back to whether or not the DDA with the limited funds that we do have, there is that pot of 20,000 for district enhancements. If we feel there's any need to offer something supplemental to what the town has offered. I feel like the town has largely had enough money to cover things. But just wanted to provide that opportunity for discussion if people feel like it would be warranted or would be a good use of DDA funding at this
The
time.
town has 125K to give out. They've given out 80, right? Or something.
Yeah,
Then that means that what if they run out of 125K and there's more applicants? Then possibly we could do something.
Yeah.
What if, can we leave that open? Like if the town runs out of 125, then we can maybe add in another
we
10
talked a
or
lot about
15.
like it's the maybe for some of the stuff that wouldn't, if it's that in between area, right?
Okay, so you're
That we could
like the water heater.
correct, or we could kick in for someone. And also, I think it's a good thing if if there's extra, right? If there's someone who's like, oh man, they don't really fit, but they came up with like a really good idea, it
Yeah.
would be easy to kick in that and say, hey, this is wouldn't fit for this grant, but
So
we'd like
but we
to
will,
kick
but
in,
yeah,
So
or
then-
talk with the town and say, hey, what if we kick in their half?
Sure. So, but how do we have them come to us for that? Because that's what's going to have to happen.
yep.
They're going to have to then come to us, or we're going to have to reach out to them.
Yes,
Yeah.
so I think this could be structured in a couple different ways. I don't think we need to necessarily make people fill out multiple applications if the goals of the
No.
programs are similar. If we have different goals, different criteria.
But they need to stand here and tell us. So
So
it's on record.
and again, we don't have to do any of this. We can save these funds for other things. It could
Right.
be if somebody is saying they can't cover their match and wanted to request funding from the DDA to help with the match. It could be for items that don't fit within the scope. That said, the way our current investment policy is written, the scope is pretty similar. So we'd have to probably revisit that and just make sure that we felt that what we were covering provided that public benefit piece. One of the things that seemed to come up in a couple applications that was deemed ineligible, the water heater was one, and then just kind of those marketing pieces. And I was thinking again, the marketing for an individual business, whether or not you can say there's a public benefit there is maybe a little bit of a stretch. I mean, if it's bringing business to Fraser, it could be looking at more collective Fraser kind of marketing efforts. I mean, I was thinking of the ski train ride promotion and then maybe kind of something more summer focused.
Well, like if you
Maybe
look
like
at
a collective marketing
Solstice,
at the rodeo.
sure. If you look at Solstice, like they're hardly visible even though they're over there. So then something helping their patio, knowing that there's a restaurant over there, like outdoor seating. It's hard to find that place, like you have to drive through Safeway, through all the cars over there. And even when you're looking at the signs, it's bland enough where it's hard to tell that it's a restaurant.
Like your idea, they could do like a temporary patio, almost like Wake and Bacon does.
Right, yeah. We put up ours outside of the roastery
I think
out
we had
back.
we had that discussion about the temporary patio actually during the
Yeah.
Okay.
discussion. And some of the logistics around that.
Like if that building was set up differently, I think it'd be great to have a patio that looked
Yeah.
over the Fraser River and the open space. And I drove back there after we got our application and it's just not, that building's not set up that way.
No.
And it's
No.
ugly parking and,
Yeah.
but something to increase visibility for that Safeway marketplace.
Huge.
I think would be huge for those businesses.
I do too. I
Yeah.
do too.
So, I mean, while I like the idea a lot of a supplemental grant funding thing, it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse here.
Yeah,
We
I
just
agree.
don't have
We
the
don't have money.
assets.
Yeah.
So to me, this is something that is aspirational. I'd love to see us do it
Mhm.
when we have a
Mhm.
nice reservoir of money.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't think 20K is gonna go very far this year.
Yeah.
So
No.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a huge jump in terms of the town support.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is pretty meaningful.
Yeah. But if someone wants to make a case,
Yeah.
I'd like to leave that open because sometimes as a business, people they go to the town, they don't get what they need, and then maybe we see it differently.
Yeah, and you don't want someone to not do something because they're $1,500,
Well, we
5,000
talked about it,
short.
like where it's like,
so.
I think it'll also be something like we would all see.
Yeah.
Like if there's something where we're like, and we use the park bench example, it's like, hey, if you find a place, you're like, man, it'd be really nice if there was a bench here. It's like Abby's always talking about shade, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it's like
right.
if you found a place, you're like, man, nothing's gonna go in here. No one's really gonna do anything, but it would be nice. I think some of those things will come up in the future.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, totally. I agree. We should try to not spend money this year.
Yeah.
But but I want it open where people feel like they can have a place to go if they can't go to the town or they've tried an avenue. There needs to be another avenue. We're that avenue,
Well,
regardless.
if we're
That's
always
our
gonna
mission
get-
statement.
We're always gonna review the subcommittee's findings on grant
Yep.
applications.
Yeah.
So
I
we
think
can
so.
just kind of
Yeah.
bring
Well, no.
things at this meeting and say, well, water heater should be covered,
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll
do it
the
if they
town doesn't
don't,
wanna
yeah.
Do it, then we'll discuss doing it if the applicant comes.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so I hear we are not instituting a formal program at this time, but that there is an open door for somebody to make a particular request to the DDA.
Yeah, ongoing,
Yeah.
as need basis.
How do people like know about this then, like beyond just asking us? Like, how would we like get the word out that we can like potentially help?
I think we,
The networking events are for.
That's in the
Yeah.
budget too.
I would,
Marketing.
I would just envision if everyone knows about the business enhancement grant, then we can like,
Add on there.
add on to that, but I think creating another application for 20 grand's like.
Definitely not an application. like us.
Should we add on?
No, and we would,
Trust me.
I would say, there was at least one applicant in the pool, that asked for a reduced match that we didn't grant. So if the DDA wanted to entertain helping with that match, that I think we need to have that publicly out there.
Mm.
So it's not just people who are in the know that can request it.
Mhm.
Again, I don't know that we have to offer that, but if we do, we'd at least need some verbiage on our website and, be able to speak to it kind of intelligently of what might be eligible
Yeah,
and,
okay, and not that the business enhancement grant is like bound by the statutory nature of the town necessarily, but I think the DDA is kind of that
In between.
less regulated
Yes.
pot of money,
Mhm.
if you will. So maybe we just communicate that, gap funding, however you call it. that
okay,
That's like, we're the source for
That's
that.
I could see that too, where someone, hey, they got a great estimate, and then they find something else, and then in the future, maybe all the money's taken up, and it's like, oh man,
okay.
we need a couple grand to finish this.
Well,
up.
if you'd like, I could work on language around gap funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we do
and
that with
bring
the
that to
town?
next meeting.
Can we have like on their business enhancement grant at the bottom? If you're
Yeah.
not eligible, apply, you talk to the DDA or something.
Additional sources. of-
We can add language in there
Additional
on the
sources are
DDA
available to the
webpage,
DDA.
yeah, something could go out.
Okay.
And I guess I would strive for a balance between transparency and not trying to totally open the floodgates at everybody that applies. I mean, that's my fear, right? Because we had a
Yeah.
checkbox if you wanted to request a reduced match, and a lot of people checked it, but then what
They
they
didn't
wrote in their
ask, yeah.
applications didn't really correspond with checking that,
Yeah.
whereas others did. So yes, the balance between trying to provide help where there's a need and somebody's really not going to do this project because they just can't afford it, with everybody who applies for a town business enhancement grant trying to then get their 50% match covered. So, but I can work on language for that if that makes sense and bring that to our next meeting.
If you tell someone they can save money, they're gonna try.
Right.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if they have the money or not. They're gonna be like, you'll pay for it? Cool.
Okay, great. So last but not least, we have the Fraser comp plan survey. So some folks had asked to look at this, and then we will have some updates regarding the results on the retail restaurant survey. Let me attempt to pull this up, but if you have your device, you can probably follow along better on your own. Not exiting. Can't get to anything right now. Oh, let's try that. Sorry, technical difficulties. All right. So hopefully some of you have had a chance to kind of look through this. And I'd be curious because I know, I think Greg, it was your suggestion that we put this up on the website, which we can definitely do, link to it as a PDF. I'd be curious what of this information you think would be particularly helpful to just throw it all up or certain pages. But I think some of the idea was just to kind of see what people had said they wanted to see in terms of economic development downtown as part of our comp plan process, and particularly in regards to kind of restaurant and retail. So to kind of walk through things, and then I'd be curious what stood out to people or kind of your takeaways. There was 181 people that completed this. A good chunk of them do live in Fraser full time. And then your mix of part-time residents, people who live just outside of Fraser, you know, in kind of unincorporated Grand or surrounding towns. Few business owners in there, people that recreate in Fraser. And pretty good mix of ages, 45 to 54 and 55 to 64, 65 plus strong demographics in terms of who answered the survey. So something to keep in mind. So the first question was, why do you choose to live, work, play in Fraser? So there are a lot of kind of comments just to weed through, but again, would just be curious of anything in particular that kind of stood out to people. Reading through, I saw a lot of comments on small size, great close-knit community, not overly developed, the beauty. A lot of comments about the trail system, a lot of skiers, bikers, hiking. Several comments about the vibe, liking the vibe of Fraser, the natural environment, events, quality of life, affordability, not too crowded. Some focused on arts, music, breweries, the people, access to Winter Park. Anything else that stood out to people here? Okay. So then the next question was scrolling. When in Fraser, what specific establishments do you visit most often for the following spending categories? Whether the establishment is located in Fraser or not. I don't think there really are any big surprises or anything of particular interest. Obviously, people go to Safeway for their groceries.
No kidding.
There's only a handful of kind of restaurants and breakfast spots. So people go to the roastery for breakfast. Safeway. They go to Ace or Murdoch's for hardware. Keep scrolling. Sharky's is also frequented for breakfast as we get there.
So Ace and Safeway.
Yeah, and this is why, like I said, I don't know that this, I mean, there's no harm in putting it up, but I don't know that there's much value in putting that piece up. So again, breakfast, not a ton of variety, simple coffee, roastery. The Pert came up a couple times, Sharky's, Waking Bacon. A little more variety for dinner away from home and lunch spots. Azteca popped up quite a bit for dinner. Number of different restaurants, a lot of them in Winter Park. Colorado Corn Dog Company made it in there.
Can you see people's responses and whether or not they're full-time?
That's so
Part-time,
tiny.
I guess.
I believe so. We actually looked at the raw data.
Because there's a lot of like, I want to target, and then a lot of like, I don't want to chain here. And I'm
That'd
just
be
curious
right
where
now.
that sentiment comes from. you know,
Locals
like
versus
locals
tourists.
versus-
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
definitely be worth looking at.
Mhm.
And so the next question is focused on what people would like to see. And to Greg's point, I feel like there's a decent split between people wanting the Target and wanting more fast food and Trader Joe's and things like that to people really focused on no chains, smaller businesses. A couple other things that stood out to me, people asking for kind of indoor activities and options when the weather's
Mhm.
not great, looking for things other than alcohol.
Mhm.
But really kind of, like you said, all over the place. So yeah, I can try to figure out, I don't have that data, but the comp team would, of the difference between who's responding.
A lot of like clothing retail too.
Yeah, focus on small businesses.
Mhm.
I think a few people asked for Chinese.
Yes, a
food.
tie a couple
Thai, yeah.
times.
I
Good
want some
Thai
pho.
Yeah, let's get that in town.
Mm.
Some real pho.
Pho with the veggie option.
It's great.
And so this one I do think is interesting for the DDA. And I asked them specifically to include this to provide to the AIRS team that was doing our plan of development. But with a few keywords or phrases, what is most important to your vision for downtown Fraser? And so again, a mix of comments. I think there's some great stuff in there: walkability, bikeability, keep Fraser funky. Again, a lot of focus on the current vibe and great community feel, cohesively designed community. There are some comments about bringing in more tourism, making it a destination, not a drive-through. Comments around how do you create a downtown that's not just identified by being divided by Highway 40. And I think with that Riverwalk visioning, that's part of the comp plan. They really are trying to strive for that with the development of Clayton Court.
Yeah, one of the things I've always thought about Fraser's economic development is we have a real advantage in that we don't have to convince people to come here. We just have to convince them to stop
Yeah.
because they're already here.
That's right.
And that is a lesser challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Parking quite a bit, and that would definitely help if there wasn't a struggle to park.
Yep.
So
Parking slow down on 40.
Yeah, and frankly, selfishly from a center standpoint, but from the standpoint of what Nick just said, I think the single greatest thing that the town could do is have a clear articulation of a common parking solution.
Yeah.
So we know what it is, so that developers, hospitality businesses, services businesses, et cetera, can start to get organized around, okay, when I have 15 trucks who are, getting their tires put on, I know where I can put them.
Yep.
And where my customers can park.
Mhm.
I feel like that's been a common theme across the EDAC and
Yep.
formation of this is just clear communication about where stuff is,
Yep. And even if it's a vision,
Yeah.
that we intend to have this solution in this way, that would inform a lot of the business planning that's going on in this community.
Yeah, and that conceptuals for the Riverwalk district does have shared parking.
does.
Where does it show it?
It does.
Where does it show it on the map?
It shows it kind of on the northwest side of Clayton Court.
Alvis. That's super important.
Yeah, I
That's
can pull up
curious.
that.
Yeah, I wasn't under the impression that was anywhere close to being set, but maybe.
It is not. I mean, it's property that's owned by somebody else.
Right.
So again, it's a mix of property that's currently owned by private individuals that are doing what they're doing with it, a mix of private developers that are looking to actively develop and redevelop properties. And then I think just the cost factor of parking structures, which is abhorrently
Very,
expensive.
very simple example of why this matters is we're currently for the center planning on about $2 to $2.5 million for the first floor because of parking.
Yeah.
If I knew that there was another solution, that reduces the bogey that I have to hit in order to break ground.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think something too that the town had, and then was that economic incentive program, right? And then it went away.
Yep.
EDAC was supposed to renew it. That went away,
Yep.
and then nothing's really happened since. And like that program, separate from the business enhancement grant program, is something that would get a parking structure, facilities, whatever,
Yep.
that sort of stuff. So I think maybe if we recommend to the town to reinstitute that.
Well, there is a
it's good.
current economic incentive program.
It
It is what it's open. As we were evaluating the previous program with different options and looking at what a lot of communities were doing, most communities did not have a set, everybody who opens a business gets this. It was more of a, tell us what you want to bring to Fraser, tell us where your financial need is, tell us what benefits you'll provide and what you would like to request to make this happen.
For a new development,
For new development, yes.
because
Yeah.
I think Fraser will need to have protocol as to what they're gonna provide based off the like Winter Park can go do that and turn the ice rink into the, like, and be kind of judging it as it comes. I don't know that Fraser can necessarily do that. And last I heard about that incentive program was it was for business owners. And there's no one who's like, I'm gonna open a business and build a 200 space parking garage.
Correct. So
You need
the-
to have it for developers.
yeah,
It's my opinion.
as a home rule municipality, when we started, not a home rule, a statutory municipality, when we looked back into the economic incentives and consulted with our legal counsel, what we were previously offering worked for Vicious Cycle and the distillery. Those were the two big businesses that got it because they were both the business owners and the building owners. They were building the buildings and running the business. Statutorily, as our legal counsel has interpreted it, we are not legally able to offer a developer tax incentives if they're not running the business. Couple things to keep in mind, the DDA has that ability. So things within the DDA boundaries, we can work with developers on. The town is also looking at the process of potentially becoming home rule. It is a pretty involved process. It involves a couple different elections. First, you have to go to the voters and ask if they want a home rule charter commission to be formed, who they want on that commission, the people run for it. Correct me if I misstate anything. And then that home rule charter committee creates the charter and that goes to the voters for approval.
Mhm.
So that is something that some of the Board of Trustees members want and that we are looking into, and just trying to make sure we have enough kind of bandwidth and staff resources to move forward with that at this time and that it makes sense. Like there's reasons to do it, there's reasons not to. So that's something that the town is actively looking at and exploring, and could be happening in the near future, which would provide us in part more flexibility with some of those economic incentives that could be offered to a developer.
Yeah.
Um,
Cause yeah, I
But
think
yeah.
whether that or an incentive program to say we're gonna have something on a private landowner's property with 20,000 in the bank for the only entity that can do it's kind of foolish. Not
Yeah, yeah.
foolish, but like, we wanna, we need to create a real funding mechanism or incentive that I don't know that the DDA can do in its infancy. And I just worry we're gonna miss that kind of all the development happening.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
well, but I agree with all that. And
Happened in
it's not a
Tahoe.
but, it's an and. If we had a consensus as to what the solution is going to be, then that's something that, it could start as a dirt lot. And then between the town and the DDA, as our assets grow, as the community grows, we have a portion of funding that goes towards paving it. And then as the community grows and new development takes place and the DDA's assets grow and the town's assets grow, we build a structure. It can be a
But I don't-
15-20 year plan.
But can the town acquire land like that? Cause it just, for the dirt,
Yeah.
right, it's hundreds of thousands minimum.
the town can buy land.
Could purchase the land
Yep.
for a lot. and
Yeah, but
then-
is it gonna be
That's,
close
I
enough?
mean, the center land
Is it gonna
the
be
town
here?
purchased and gave to us.
Yeah,
What about
Yeah.
the whole yard over there? I mean, that's like the closest thing.
It's not in the.
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
Have to be annexed
Yeah.
in.
Right.
And I know that
So it can become
some people in Winter Park Resort are interested in
Yep.
turning the pole yard into like a park and ride.
Mm.
Which may have its benefits, but it's also thinking of the alternatives of what that real estate could be used for, and if that's make the best fit for Fraser, if it is annexed into Fraser.
Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to solve it, but I am
Yeah.
saying that I do think it's an impediment on every level for the town, the DDA, individual business owners, guests, the community, getting people who are already here to stop. And if we could solve that, at least conceptually, then we're in the path to doing it versus not having even a vision.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important step.
Well, and I think there's much lower hanging fruit too than building parking or whatever, you know, like Clayton Court's going in May, June, that'll be 60 spaces,
Yep.
56 spaces.
Yep.
And like clear signage to show that there's 56 spaces there, you know, that at least solves kind of this section of town's parking or just stop and walk around
Yep.
problem. And then just kind of notifying maybe better for the businesses that are in Murdoch's and Solstice, you know.
Yep.
I think signage and communication somehow on 40 is very achievable. Just
Seems like it.
I feel like we could do that with 20 grand.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good
Yeah.
use of
Yeah, I
funds.
think that's a good
Yeah.
call.
I don't have a solution either, so.
Yeah. But I think it's challenging. Like there's only so much space in Fraser. So people want parking and need parking, but you also don't want to turn all of that limited space into.
I
wonder-
hear you, but it's to me, it's one of those things, and I've been a full-time resident here for 6 years now, part-timer for 20. It's one of those things where we always stop at that statement.
Yeah.
It's challenging, it's hard, fine, let's figure it out.
I wonder,
I mean, dude,
in
even
New
in
York,
front of
they always-
Sharky's, you have like that whole space that's like where the bus stop is, right?
Mhm.
And then you have statues and rocks, right? Like, love it, but you can move that in and make more spaces. There's another 10 spaces you
Well,
can
it just brings
make
up
out
the
of that.
tracks too. So then it's like,
It's-
well, it's hard with the railroad, but it's like, I parked there all summer. And it's just lined up, and it's like, it's already being used as parking,
It's already parking spaces.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know?
It's just like, can we really label that as parking? Because then Amtrak
Well, I know
will probably
that's
get
the
on our
problem.
case
Is
about
people
it.
come in and
So,
ask us
yeah.
about around the bus stop, because it depends on once it gets patrolled for the 2 hours.
Mhm.
But it's hard because then people will be like, oh, I could just take the bus. Oh, I can't leave my car here.
Yeah, but also if you park too far away, say that you want to go to the Birdie Lounge, right? And you do the loop around the distillery and the Birdie Lounge 4 times, no one moves. You're already frustrated enough to say, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I've
Greg's
done that
point, though,
like
is a
6
good one.
times and I live here.
And Greg's point's a good one, is this summer, that will improve dramatically.
Yeah.
with
Mhm.
Clayton
Yeah.
Court.
But I wonder how, like, I'm always impressed by like the guerrilla marketing kind of efforts of events and brands and whatnot. And if we are marketing people to stop in Fraser, like I don't think it's necessarily the Fraser logo that gets them to stop here. So it's like, what are we advertising if that's our efforts to get people to stop? Just because people see a sign that it's Fraser, do they stop?
No.
Or do they need to see like, oh, cold beer, good food,
Sure.
something to do?
Yep.
Yeah, it's like Idaho
Um,
Springs, the gold mine. They
Yeah.
like put that all over the place.
But like to use our funds to attract people to stop for all the things that are being offered, how do we?
Yeah, well, that's why I happen to think that some of the events that we run as a town, Mural Festival, Fire and Ice,
Yeah,
those types of things draw people here and they're on their feet.
yeah.
And so they walk into your businesses.
Sure. But you're
and I
talking more
think
like
that-
regularly, like as anybody coming
Yeah, yeah.
through.
When you're
So
like,
let me
what's
finish
the
the thought.
go ahead.
It's extending that type of concept so that there are more reasons for people to get out of their car and be on their feet around our community.
Well, I think we're, back to where the beginning, we're talking about like signage and like an electronic sign. When there is not a festival, you could highlight a business
Mhm.
on that sign. So that sign's constantly advertising
Yeah.
around the town. If that's something that we want to pursue in the future, electronic sign, that's how we could use that too.
Yeah.
Not just for events.
Sorry, I didn't want to derail things, but
No.
I just think it is the central question.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that the comp plan is looking at in terms of where that parking could be and how you can make that happen.
Or like in Steamboat, they have like the art walk and then they have like all those little areas where you dip your feet into the water.
Yeah.
You can highlight stuff like that. Be like, get out of your car and dip your feet in the Fraser
Well,
River
Steamboat Two's
if
got,
you have a place to do it.
Steamboat's got, 6 or 7 lights in half a mile.
It's
Super
because
helpful.
it's true. The issue is though, if you start highlighting 1 or 2 businesses at a time, the other ones are gonna get pissed off.
Yeah.
Well, it's gotta be like
So
fair or like
Yeah.
rotated or whatever.
sure. And then you have to advertise that to the town that that's what's happening. And it's not that we shouldn't do that. It's that we should find the things that are more common that everybody, that the town naturally attracts, whether it's the river walk, whether it's
Hiking, biking.
hiking, biking, and it
Cross-country.
really
Yeah.
needs, you have to be able to see that from the highway. Not everybody can see the 150 trails that we have here, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
That's
know
a
that
good
it's a
point
biking
about-
community, but we need to say, get out, rent a bike, go,
Mhm.
there's multiple places you rent from, right? Like, so we're not just saying go to,
Again, there's a lot of stuff like I
the
said,
broker
bus,
or
there's a
whatever.
lot of people who would start and stop in Fraser more, but end up driving to Winter Park.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could park, leave your
Well-
car. I mean, you drive through Winter Park in the morning, there's people at every bus stop with their skis, snowboards. Here, not so much, because where do you leave your car?
Well, and that's,
Yeah, nowhere.
I think,
Safeway.
people go
Yeah.
rent
Yeah,
at
sure.
Christie Sports
Bingo.
because it's Christie Sports and they know it's there. Like I've had friends come up here and I'm like, go to the ski broker, go to the bike shop in Murdoch's. And then they're like, we just went to Christie's because like we got here before you did.
It's easier, yeah.
So I think it's, just awareness.
Any other thoughts about the survey information?
Or just post it rather than parse it. So let people do what they
What they
want
want
with
with
it.
it.
Okay.
Read all of it if they want.
It's already.
Okay. You don't worry that people aren't going to get to the end when they are scrolling through
If they're
Safeway
looking
for
for that
pages.
information,
Okay.
they're gonna go dig through it.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
If we don't.
All right.
Yeah, the whole TLDR thing, I have zero patience for. If you're a serious person and you need information or data, go get it.
Yeah.
Have the patience to.
deals.
Yeah.
Should it?
All right. I think we're just up to updates.
Yep. The social media, networking, etc.
So, Abby may or may not be having a baby right now. I had
Yeah.
texted with her to see if she was going to be here. I couldn't remember her due date. Just yesterday, and she was planning to be here, but she said the baby dropped last night in bed, trying to see if this is a tease. So, I know she has felt that she laid out grand expectations for social media and has not realistically had the time to fulfill those expectations. So, she did launch the Instagram account. So it is up there. We talked a little bit before with Sarah Wick, but try to talk to her again and maybe just kind of formally see if she can take on more of that for the DDA for the time being. So I think it is a good way to be out there in the community and just kind of have a presence and, share information. So that's the social media update. I don't know if I mentioned this previously. I think it was just after our last DDA meeting, we did get notified by DCI that we have been nominated for one of their Downtown Excellence Awards with AIRS for the plan of development that was created. I think AIRS really focused the nomination request submission on being able to do it in such a compact amount of time versus spending 6 months, a year and a half, kind of creating a plan, which is often the case with these sorts of things. So those nominations will be honored and someone will be awarded at the DCI conference in April. Thursday night, the last night of the conference. So we'll let you know what happens with that. I think right now I did sign up to attend, but it doesn't look like any of the board members have availability. So I will bring back any information that seems particularly relevant to Fraser. But yeah, I think it's a worthwhile event, but I know it is a big time commitment. But if in future years DDA board members are available for, a couple of days, I think it is a great opportunity just to kind of really network and learn more about what other communities are doing and what they've got going on. In terms of the DDA coffee hour, I know a handful of you were there. I think it was the turnout that I would say I had hoped for. It was small, but it's a small community. I think that was to be expected. Tanya from the Corn Dog Company reached out afterwards and said she really enjoyed it and hoped that we did more of them and that it was just a nice opportunity to meet other business owners in the DDA and learn about what's going on. So I think that they're worth continuing. I think we can promote them a little bit better and get the word out and just see how they go. But especially with limited funds, I think it's a nice way to have a presence in the community. So I think we can talk maybe at our April meeting about what the next one looks like. But if we wanted to shoot for something May or June, maybe have something late afternoon when we potentially have patio weather. Might be a nice way to go about it, but we can keep switching up the locations and coffee hours versus a distillery or whatnot and see how they go. I think we could also keep maybe having an area of focus for each one. So creating them largely as kind of a social event, but if you want to think about what that might look like or would make sense. One idea was I know Patrick Brower came, but maybe just having a quick talk about available resources for small businesses, something like that might make sense for one of them. Any other updates?
This is totally unrelated to what you were just talking about, but could we get on those crosswalks across 40 that have the lighted ones on the side? Can we get a big sign in the middle that lights up too on the median?
There was supposed to be a flashing beacon in the middle.
Uh-huh.
And my understanding is when it finally arrived, there was all these delays and the shipment was lost for a while or something of that nature. We did not have the middle beacon, so we are working on getting that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that is the plan though.
Yeah. People still are not stopping there.
Yeah, on that point, is there anything we can do to like encourage the police to patrol that? I'm not really sure if they have the manpower or whatnot, but
It's much different. when
unless
they're
I have
out
my
there walking
kids with
around,
me,
though.
nobody stops.
Yeah, nobody
Like
stops.
nobody stops. So,
Yeah.
like, and I think that's illegal technically. Yeah.
Trainer's at the board meetings all the time. If you just brought it up, I'm sure he would.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I go out of my way to be obnoxious and stop.
I had to pull out,
Oh, yeah.
like in oncoming traffic to help a pedestrian
Yeah,
cross because no one
totally.
was stopping for them.
At the
Like I honked
crosswalk.
at and everything. It was like, they're
That's
not
crazy.
stopping for
Yeah.
it, man.
Yeah,
Like,
I cross
Yeah,
like
I
3
block it.
times a day and I'm like, never. I just like
Yeah.
step out there and I'm like, good luck.
Well, because that would honestly, like, I've seen those crosswalks that are like, ours is,
Like, am I getting paid today?
they're kind of like the probably cheapest, thinnest version, but like if we got a beefy one, you know, that's got 10 lights instead of 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the middle would help out a lot.
I think
It
that would
would.
help a lot.
Yeah.
so
And
Happy
gotta
it's
remember
under-
people
Yeah,
are,
I can
in
share
some
that
form of
feedback.
area Vacation.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. They shouldn't be, but they are.
To do that one too. but
Well, it's
not
like
so much
people
the
are
one
also
by
like
the gas station because
everything
people are
else, I think.
going slower over there.
Yeah, they're about
They
to hit the
start-
light anyway.
And then there's,
Yeah, so-
when they're coming away
But
from
if
the
it's
light,
like
they're
people
speeding
like
up to
like
go 65 over to Tabernacle.
That happens right outside the post office.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
supposed to be
exactly, right there.
35 to County Road 8,
Same
and
thing.
I'm
That
sticking
one-
there and I almost get crushed at least
I sit
twice a
there.
week.
I see that one a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one by Birdie Lounge, I mean, it's gotten me before because I've sped up to get into traffic, making a left-hand turn at Eisenhower, and it's pretty quick after that turn where you've just sped up to make it
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a
And, like,
couple cars
stop,
stopped,
yeah.
yeah. But it's unfortunate to hear that with the flashing lights, it doesn't seem to be improving.
think just
'cause
right-
I feel like they make it much more visible.
oh,
Oh yeah, I
sure.
use, I use
Absolutely.
all of them, but that one right there next to Birdie Lounge, it just, with all of the buildings and stuff, it's not as visible as the 2 on the outside.
Okay, yeah, I'll
So-
check in, but I know the plan is to
Yeah.
put in a blinking light in the middle.
I think we should push the limit to whatever CDOT.
Yeah. well,
Get them to say it's too bright and too, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pedestrian
Thank
lights.
for
that-
forgiveness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, well, sorry, we didn't know.
Some strobe lights
Yeah.
and Vegas.
We do have a new business when we get there.
I'm sorry?
Are we at new business now?
We're just at
Other-
general updates, so any
Yeah.
updates
Okay.
you have?
Good.
So yeah, just a request actually. Kevin, Greg's business partner, is a member of the Fraser Valley Arts Board, and he and I and a few others have been working on an economic impact analysis of what the center would bring to the community. We're getting close to having a reasonable thesis on that. We've been getting some data from national sources and so forth. And what I'd like to do, if this group is open to it, is bring that model to an upcoming meeting, either the next one or the one after that, and have about a 20 to half an hour discussion where we show you the data, but more importantly, show you the assumptions behind the data. So for example, there's some really good research data that suggests that each person who comes to a performing arts event spends $38 in addition to the price of their ticket on that day. And so we want to take you through those data to see if you agree with them, disagree with them, would inform the model otherwise before we finalize the model and start to quote a thesis around, if we build the center, this is the economic impact that it would bring. Does that sound like something you all be willing to
Yeah.
spend some
I'd be
time on?
interested, Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's cool.
for sure.
Okay, cool. And Sarah, we'll coordinate with you and in terms of the
Yeah.
agenda. I do want to check with Kevin. He's still in Mexico, I think. So
Tomorrow,
yeah, eating really good food.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Mexico City is one of the best culinary capitals on the planet.
Technically working.
Yeah, very is.
That's what he says.
Some would argue Fraser.
Yes.
All
Right,
right.
right behind you.
Any other updates, thoughts?
While we have time, I was just kind of curious if anybody wanted to actually talk about real signage to go up on the highway, because it's kind of getting to that point where we have 2-3 months to kind of get it up before there's a ton of people in town again. And just like either playing off traffic and be like stuck in traffic, stop in Fraser kind of stuff. Just like kind of advertising that, because we do have a little bit of money to spend, and now might be the time to actually like start the conversation about what we want to put where and how it's going to happen and everything. So I don't know if that's a discussion for a later time or if we want to put that on next month's agenda or whatnot, but I just don't want to get to June and be like, okay, now we have like 3 months until it's up. So,
I would think a good agenda item would be to look at where we can put signs, because there's that one on the north end, and just like highlight where we can put them and then what makes sense.
So I'll throw in, and I was going to mention this earlier when it came up in conversation. The town of Fraser, Winter Park, and Winter Park Resort participate in this. They call the group Sustainable Communities. But anyways, they commissioned a firm to do a formal wayfinding study. So that is underway. They were actually in Fraser, Winter Park, and the resort last week, 2 weeks ago. It's all blending together. So they're looking at signage that would have some degree of uniformity from basically kind of the top of Berthoud Pass down through Fraser.
Sweet.
In conversations to see if kind of elsewhere in the county people would want to get on board, but the focus is resort through Fraser. So they're looking at that. So I realize people want signage now, but any sort of permanent signage like that, I would probably recommend waiting until that is completed and there's some kind of formal recommendations. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the signage that was just recently put up by the town of Fraser to replace the really old signage with the new logo and whatnot, but they should have some recommendations, preliminary reports out in I think about 6 to 8 weeks. But they showed some different models of what they're looking at and what they've done for regional signage in different places. So one of them they showed, I don't know if anyone has been to Bentonville, Arkansas, but a few kind of different models where everywhere in the region has a similar signage, but maybe what people seem to be leaning towards is this model of it's similar, but then there's something distinct to Fraser, like at the bottom of all the Fraser signs. So kind of a unique touch for Fraser Winter Park, the resort, but
maybe
having
the
more uniform
colors could be
signage.
different, but
Yeah.
like the overall design is pretty much the same, but just the colors are different for each town and each like distinction.
That could be one possibility. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll ask if
um,
I can get that presentation that they were sharing
that'd be cool, yeah.
and see if I can send that out to you guys.
Okay.
I think one thing we could maybe is worth spending time on with this group is how we could support, like the Mural Fest, if we do farmers market happening again this year? How we could support that with signage or, temporary
Support,
signage
like,
and
event signage.
instructions on where to park, just to
Yeah.
help with event coordination. I don't know if that's our role or not, but
It could be.
could always, it feels like it could always be better for
Yeah.
these coming to town. how to-
Temporary
where to
event
go.
signage. Well, and Steve also came in and talked with the town because the art center's been looking at signage as well and advertising these events and again, trying to have something cohesive that serves the town, the art center,
Yeah.
the DDA versus everybody just throwing up their own signage. So there's been talk about potentially something over Highway 40 if CDOT could be on board with that, what that looks like.
'Cause for
And,
the
and
next-
Brian is gonna investigate that on behalf of all the parties.
Cause I could probably get something up on that corner of Clayton Avenue and 40 for the next year and a half.
Okay.
That's, not a beautiful permanent sign for everything, but,
Yeah.
turn here.
And
That's a good point.
information.
We'll have parking there,
Yeah. That's a good point.
Informational. Yeah.
Yeah,
And if it,
And I don't-
if it was intentionally temporary,
yeah. Cause I mean, if the town has one of those big, I don't know, where you make the letters
I
on
mean,
the
I do know
lights.
when the pancake breakfasts are, cause you do see their.
Oh yeah, they're good at that.
It does
oh,
work.
Maybe we should
the
hire-
planar at altitude signs that we put in the middle of 40 for
Mhm.
7 days absolutely drives almost all of our ticket sales.
Yeah,
Yeah,
No brainer.
yeah.
So it's clear it works.
one for like justifying the
What
art.
part of 40 do
the
you
art
do that
center
on again?
display Until that's built out is. very
Yeah.
good.
It's one right before the Safeway turn near the orange Snowcat and one just over here as you
Right.
leave town.
Right. I was gonna say
Town's been
because the
super
one on the
cooperative.
median in Winter Park is like can't even see it.
Yeah.
You just blow by it. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what's there.
One idea that the wayfinding people had,
That's a
'cause,
good idea.
I talked about the different spots. We had talked about potentially having like an over the highway sign or an electronic marquee on the side. Was if you did put it closer to the actual boundary between Fraser and Winter Park, you could have Fraser, say Fraser on one side and Winter Park on the other side, and then the towns could split the cost of that
Yeah.
versus,
Don't hate that.
Yeah.
yeah. So.
Yep.
Think they were more in favor of some sort of electronic marquee to the side versus the over
Yeah.
highway
well, I
sign,
mean, you
just
know,
based on cost and dealing with CDOT.
Yeah, and I don't want to over rotate before we get actually to design things, but one of the things that I think is really important is a good example here is the electronic sign they have at Highway Park. It's too small, it's too complicated, and there's too much information.
Yeah.
Way too much.
No, yeah, it's
Right.
parking.
Yeah.
I've always
So
thought
you
that our
just ignore it.
billboards are tiny.
Yeah, totally.
So if we're gonna do something, it's gotta say Mural Festival
Yeah.
date.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
it.
got to stay there.
Right,
It can't
yeah.
just be like every 10 seconds.
And then as soon as the Mural Festival's over, it's the next event. And, it's designed to get people to go to a website, which everybody does.
100%. That's what we were saying about Film Fest. It'd be like Film Fest, 2
Yep.
seconds. Oh,
100%.
16 other events. And you're like, well, that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for the month before the film festival, it just says
That'd be nice.
Film Festival.
Yeah. But we definitely need bigger billboards. Like if you drive through town and they're like 4 foot by 3 foot, you don't see that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I approached the town is I didn't want to turn this into like, Searchlight Nevada. where-
Yeah, that's straight. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, we need bigger signs.
Awesome, all the slow traffic that comes. through
Yeah.
and
100%.
Well, and there's already a sign there. There was.
There's a Fraser sign.
Yeah,
there.
Fraser
Yep.
sign there.
Sign there that would.
And then, cause you could do, I mean, the right of way that the town owns just north of the Safeway light's big. You could fit something there. Holiday Inn probably hate it, but you could also do it just past their lot.
He's not gonna want to do
Yeah,
it.
we
The
were-
Clark's
we were-
billboards that just get vandalized all the time. If those were town billboards, they probably wouldn't get vandalized.
Well, yeah.
If they had town businesses.
Well, I think too, though, once it's permanent and on 40, then you gotta deal with CDOT a bit more.
Yeah.
Cause I don't know the process, but I know it's a pain in the ass.
That's what everybody seems to indicate. Given that CDOT is doing a redesign of the highway through there, seems to be at least some thought that it makes it a little easier if we can work it into that redesign
Now, yeah.
versus just going to them with a separate
Well, and if
request.
it's temporary stuff, like Just see those big
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do have a real benefit here in that our mayor is on a couple committees, has worked with CDOT
Yeah.
before, and
think
he
Kevin-
has some good conversation contacts, and he's pursuing some of that background information for us.
I think Kevin's on that CDOT.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
All right, so we'll look at possibly this economic impact analysis for the next meeting or the following meeting.
Yeah, I will, when Kevin gets back, I'll follow up with him and I'll target the next meeting, but I'll confirm it with you soon.
Okay, and then with signage, maybe discussion focusing on some somewhat temporary signage focused on things like events
Okay.
and parking. Okay, great. All right.
All right, move to adjourn
Second.
first. Who's first?
Oh.
So
I'll
moved.
move this.
Yeah. All right,
Seconded.
guys.
Thanks.
It's our first meeting done before 11.
I know. Look at us.
We had a window to be done at like 10:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.